Have you ever spent years studying a language, grinding through apps, flipping through flashcards, and memorizing grammar tables, only to freeze the moment a native speaker asks you a simple question? Your heart races, your mind goes blank, and suddenly you feel like you've never seen a word of that language in your life. If this sounds familiar, I have some news that might surprise you. Your problem isn't a lack of talent, it isn't a lack of motivation, and it's definitely not that you aren't smart enough. The truth is much more fascinating. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. You see, the human brain is not a hard drive designed for data storage. It is a biological filter designed for survival. It follows one brutal evolutionary rule. If information doesn't feel immediately useful, emotional, or vital, it gets deleted. Today, we are going to look at the cognitive architecture of fluency. We're going to deconstruct how polyglots, people who speak 5, 8, or even 12 languages, actually work. They don't have magic brains. They just have a better operating system. They work with the brain's natural hardwiring instead of fighting against it. Let's dive into the 6 core pillars that will help you hack your brain and finally achieve fluency. Part 1. The survival filter and the death of data. Before we get to the secrets, we have to understand the enemy, the survival filter. Think about it. Why is it that you can remember the lyrics to a cheesy pop song from 10 years ago, but you forget the grammar rule you studied last Tuesday? It's because the song felt alive. It had rhythm, it had emotion, and it was connected to a memory. The grammar rule, on the other hand, felt abstract, stressful, and disconnected from your real life. When you study a language as an academic subject, like history or math, your brain treats it as dead data. Polyglots understand that for a language to stick, it must bypass the amygdala, the brain's emotional gatekeeper. If the learning process feels like a boring chore, your brain labels that information as low utility and prunes it away while you sleep. To hack this, we have to shift from explicit learning, which is memorizing rules, to implicit acquisition, which is absorbing patterns through usage. Part 2. Pillar 1. The pattern brain. Chunks over words. The first major mistake most learners make is what I call the single word trap. They spend hours memorizing lists of nouns and verbs, but to your brain, isolated words are useless. Imagine trying to build a house by looking at 10,000 individual nails. You have the materials, but you have no idea how they fit together. Polyglots don't learn words, they learn chunks. Psychologically, chunking is the process of grouping individual pieces of information into a meaningful whole. Instead of learning the word read, a polyglot learns the pattern. I read a book today. Why is this a hack? Because of speed of processing. When you learn chunks, your brain doesn't have to perform mental translation. You don't have to pause, find the subject, find the verb, and figure out the tense. The entire phrase is retrieved as a single, ready-to-use unit. The rule is simple. 6 minutes of pattern-based practice beats 2 hours of random vocabulary every single time. Patterns provide a reusable skeleton. Once you have the skeleton, you can just swap out the meat. Part 3. Pillar 2. Safety and the affective filter. Now let's talk about why you freeze in conversations. This is explained by one of the most important ideas in linguistics, Stephen Krashen's affective filter hypothesis. Think of your brain as having a physical wall. When you are stressed, anxious, or afraid of looking stupid, that wall, the affective filter, rises. When the wall is high, no matter how much you study, the language cannot get into the parts of your brain that actually process speech. This is why you can understand a movie perfectly when you're alone on your couch, but you can't say hello to a waiter in a foreign country. You don't have a vocabulary problem, you have a safety problem. Polyglots prioritize comprehensible input. They consume content that they mostly understand, with just a tiny bit of challenge. We call this I+1. Because the content is understandable, the brain feels safe. The wall stays down. The language seeps into the subconscious effortlessly. If you want to be fluent, you have to stop judging yourself. No safety means no fluency. Part 4. Pillar 3. Language as a motor skill. Most people think language is a theory to be studied. Polyglots know it's a motor skill, exactly like riding a bike or playing the piano. You don't learn to ride a bike by reading a manual about the physics of balance. You get on the bike, you wobble, you fall, and your brain eventually figures it out. Polyglots speak from day one, but here's the secret. They speak badly. They don't wait for perfection. They narrate their day like a crazy person. They say, I am walking to the kitchen. I am opening the fridge. I see milk. This creates a feedback loop. By making messy sounds early on, you are training the physical muscles of your mouth and tongue. You are building muscle memory. Perfect silence is the enemy of progress. Bad speaking is progress. Part 5. Pillar 4. The struggle switch, active recall. Let's be honest. Your brain is lazy. It wants to take the path of least resistance. This is why passive review, like rereading your notes or highlighting text, feels productive but actually does almost nothing. The brain only builds long-term neural pathways when it is forced to retrieve information. This is called active recall. Polyglots use a specific hack called the power of the pause. When they hear a sentence in their target language, they don't just repeat it like a parrot. They hear it, they pause, and they force their brain to search for that structure for a second before saying it. That moment of uncomfortable stuckness, that feeling where your brain is reaching for a word that isn't quite there, that is the struggle switch. That struggle is the biological signal that tells your brain, hey, this information is vital. Strengthen the connection. If it doesn't feel a little bit difficult, you aren't actually learning. Part 6. Pillar 5. Controlled discomfort, the growth zone. Many learners get stuck in what I call the fluency trap. They learn enough to get by, and then they stop growing. They stay in their comfort zone, repeating the same easy phrases over and over. But in the brain, comfort equals stagnation. Polyglots use a principle from weightlifting called progressive overload. In the gym, you don't get stronger by lifting the same 5-pound weight for 10 years. You have to add weight. In language, you add weight by tweaking the variables. If a sentence feels easy, change the tense. If you can say, I go to the store, try saying, I would have gone to the store if it hadn't rained. Switch the subject from I to they. Add a time marker. By constantly pushing yourself into controlled discomfort, you prevent your brain from going into autopilot. This ensures that every minute you spend practicing results in actual neuroplasticity. Part 7. Pillar 6. The 95% Immersion Rule. We've all heard that immersion is the key. But total immersion in a language you don't understand is just white noise. If you move to Japan and just listen to the news without knowing a word of Japanese, you won't learn a thing. The real hack is the 95% rule. Polyglots surround themselves with content, comics, simple podcasts, children's stories, where they already understand about 95% of the words. Why? Because when you understand 95%, your brain is relaxed enough to decode the remaining 5% automatically through context. This is how you learn implicit grammar. You don't learn that the past tense of go is went by looking at a table in a textbook. You learn it because you've heard it used in 10,000 different stories. This method allows you to absorb thousands of patterns per hour without the mental fatigue of studying. Part 8. The prediction trick. Here is one final bonus technique that separates the elite polyglots from everyone else: active prediction. Passive listening, just letting the audio wash over you, is a waste of time. Instead, try this. When you are watching a video or listening to a podcast, pause it for 1 single second and try to predict the next word or phrase. If you predict correctly, your brain gets a hit of dopamine and the neural pathway is reinforced. But here's the cool part. If you predict incorrectly, your brain experiences a prediction error. This is the single most powerful trigger for learning in the human brain. It forces your brain to update its internal model of the language. Part 9. Conclusion. Fluency is a system. As we wrap this up, I want you to remember one thing. Fluency is not a gift. It is not a talent. It is a system. Polyglots succeed because they follow the rules of biology. They use chunks instead of words. They prioritize safety to lower the affective filter. They speak early and badly to build motor skills. They use active recall to flip the struggle switch. They embrace controlled discomfort, and they immerse themselves in meaningful 95% understandable content. Your brain was never the problem. You were just using the wrong operating manual, but now you have the code. So stop studying the language. Start living inside it. Use these systems, and you'll find that fluency isn't a distant dream. It's a predictable outcome. Outro: encouraging and warm. If this changed the way you look at learning, stay tuned. In our next session, we're going to talk about how to stop translating in your head and finally start thinking directly in your target language. You've got this.